Dear SoU, this is the second in a 3-part mini-series that captures the evolution of the Stories of Us workshop. When we left off in part 1, I was reveling in the bliss of having met you for the first time in your first workshop. Let me tell you, that glow wore off quickly in the months that followed, as I cold emailed everyone and their mother to try and convince them to host a Stories of Us workshop. Because we, as the Department of Imaginary Affairs, are not a direct service provider and don't work directly with newcomers, it was important that we build strong partnerships with settlement and community agencies that do work with newcomers. Once I got someone on the phone, I could usually get them to agree to hosting a 2-hour Stories of Us workshop. There was something about you, something about the space that you allow for creativity and the potential that you offer for healing that drew people in. And every time I heard the person on the other end of the phone get excited about you, it was like putting more gas in the tank to fuel the next set of cold emails. These one-off workshops were lovely, but as expected, most of the newcomers who participated left feeling like it was time well spent, but not necessarily convinced to write and publish a story. I needed more time with them. More time to understand and slowly and carefully knock down those barriers that keep us from seeing our stories as worthy of expression. I did manage to convince one organization to host a 2-part workshop series with one of their drop-in support groups. And while it was lovely to see some familiar faces the second time around, more than half the group hadn't attended the first session, and it was hard to build that sense of continuity and community when it was essentially a different group of people. That was a lesson I learned. I needed to seek out settlement programs that work with the same group of people over an extended period of time, and then convince them to let me facilitate a series of the Stories of Us workshops with them. It was important that the same group of newcomers shared the full journey. I had also learned that people don't have time to go home after a workshop to write their stories. The uninterrupted time that they spend in our workshops focusing on themselves and their stories is both rare and sacred. Again, this meant that I needed to push for more time with participants in workshops. The 2 organizations that ended up becoming our test partners for an expanded workshop series actually came to us out of left field. The first was through a friend who was on the board of a settlement organization called the Mennonite New Life Center. She connected me to their head link teacher, Teresa Weens. When Teresa asked me how many workshops it would take to go through the whole series, the number 6 flew out of my mouth. At this point, I had a vague sense of the overall arc, I had no curriculum, and was essentially counting on being able to build the plane as we flew it, based on the feedback that we received for each workshop. Thankfully, Teresa's love and longing to integrate more creativity and storytelling into her classroom, and her willingness to co-pilot as needed, convinced me that we'd figure it out. She also convinced her colleague Marie to come on board, and at the end we were able to work with 2 classes at the New Life Center at the same time. Our second partner, believe it or not, came through one of those cold emails that I dreaded sending out. New Circles is a community services organization, and their employment training manager, Joanna, saw something in you that was different than any other program they had on offer for their newcomer clients. She was about to start a new cohort of a multi-week training program and was happy to give us 1 day a week of that program, again for 6 weeks, to work our magic. And just like that, within a month, I had gone from no organizational partners to 2 organizational partners and 2 6-week workshop series that, at the time, were really just a figment of my imagination. To be able to spend 12 to 15 hours in person with the same groups of newcomers over 6 weeks was a game changer. Even in linked classrooms where the students were fairly familiar with each other, the students shared stories that they had never shared with each other, or at all, before. Each workshop built on the one before it and fed into the one after. Participants had time in each workshop to engage in some oral storytelling to warm up, and then to explore and write their responses to a set of guided prompts around that week's theme. and at the end of the workshop, participants had the opportunity to read what they had written to their peers. On my end, I created a Google Doc for each participant, and at the end of every workshop, I would take what they had written that week and transcribe it. Over the 6 weeks, their stories took form in these Google Docs in a way that was seemingly organic, yet was very intentionally designed. I was grateful to be able to provide this structure so that they didn't have to worry about how everything would fit together. I will say, it was an intense few months. I left each workshop emotionally spent and spiritually energized by the work, if that makes any sense at all. By the end of this workshop series, it was clear that you were not just a product. It wasn't just about gathering stories from newcomers to make storybooks. You were also a process, an unfolding, that could ultimately be healing in ways that we had never imagined until we witnessed it firsthand. In more tangible terms, I had unknowingly created a Stories of Us curriculum. It was at this point that Jen started seeding the idea of documenting the curriculum and training service providers like link teachers and employment counselors on how to implement it. Without training more people, my capacity was the rate-limiting step in being able to reach more newcomers. Jen had also caught on to the fact that I get bored easily and anticipated, correctly, that I would eventually get tired of implementing the same workshop series over and over. And we had also committed to scaling the program across Ontario and then Canada, and unless we could fund 7-week-long trips for me to set up shop in each province and territory, which we definitely couldn't, something needed to give. More on that in the third and final part of this mini-series.